We started 16, 17 months ago with the first panelist, Dr. Humberto de la Calle, and we are back with our top-rated panelist, Humberto de la Calle. We also have Ms. Ingrid Betancourt with us, and Senator Iván Marulanda too, and co-chair of Ana Cristina Restrepo. All of them are well-known in Colombia and outside of Colombia. If you have any questions, we will try to listen to them. You can go to the Q&A, and we will try to integrate them in the question into our conversation. A couple of announcements before we start. Next week on December 9th, we'll have our next public event, which is going to be in English, Truth and Consequences. And talk about what Brazil has done in COP26 and what it's done publicly, and what is the truth about between their presentation. Well, it's not the truth, it's the consequences. We'll start with December 20 with the second analysis for the second round. The presidential election in Chile with 4 or 5 Chilean women, very popular in the presentations we make. With that, Ana Cristina, I think that we can start. Thank you, all the panel members, for being with us. Again, we understand that you have had some very, very busy days, and we thank you again for your presentation today. Ana, good afternoon, Ken. Thank you, panel members, and everyone who is with us. We have a lot of knowledge to gather here because of a very recent meeting past weekend. We created a coalition, Centro Esperanza, but we have a series of prior knowledge about all these meetings that we've held, and we've realized that looking at we've talked here with this decalogue, everything we've talked about here are a part of this decalogue. And tell us whether you had any differences about some of the issues, specifically about some emphasis when you set up this list of. I would like to start with Dr. Humberto de la Calle. This is a story that began almost 2 years ago. The host at the time was Iván Marulanda. There we created the first version, which then it became the name of a coalition for the help, Coalición por la Esperanza. We had a pragmatic approach, a difficult process because from the initial coalition, we have some sort of differences, which fortunately we've been able to handle very well with a criterion of respect for others. And it's within that framework of respect, we have this programmatic approach after the ethical principles and a sort of political manifesto, much shorter, that is much related to the decalogue that we have from this meeting, last meeting. And that's the first stage. We have some different approaches. For example, Jorge Robledo is a critical, severe criticist of the free trade agreements, but in my case, I'm sure that we have to review the free trade agreements. I think that closing the economy excessively is not convenient. So and then we have the appearance of the candidacy of Alejandro Gaviria, the first meeting that we had, which was very manipulated by the press because it was totally respectful, very serious. There was a couple of vanity. It was not a problem of vanity. The key for the differences we had at the time between the coalition and Alejandro is that he saw the need for change, but he thought that the change could be done with the parties or with some of the current parties. But the coalition at the time thought that in such a critical situation of the parties and in general of the institutions in Colombia, it was necessary to have a new political scenario, new one, outside of the traditional machinery. There was the press knew about the different opinions and versions, and nothing, no agreement was reached. But in this last Sunday, we set up a mechanism which I think is marvelous, because based on the programmatic agreement that was did at the initially, and with the second points of Alejandro Gaviria, we set up first of all a mechanism to find the differences and whether we could be overcome, not of imposing reasons over others, but all with respect, but living in an open framework. And they're going to compete. This is going to be a consultation. Each one will have their ideas, but there will be specific ideas of discrepancies between the candidates. And for example, the way the primaries in America, everyone is going to have during several debates the opportunity to find, or they find their ideas, but the key part, which is sort of the decalogue, which is based on the different decalogue, which is common by everyone, the need for change, a real change, not just simply makeup. We need to have a change of direction, and within a framework of reflection, without based on the state of law and the need to provide in Colombia with a political scenario with, in respect to, we have a motion because there's politics with emotion. We want this to lead to rational processes of the Western democracy. What we've had, the policy in the West, which is basically the elimination of those delirious visions of leaders, of the people who are here. There are some people who have no clear idea of what are the points of that list of the points of that list. And was there a place where you said, well, Dr. Humberto says, no, there's nothing which is absolutely binding, but would there be some points where you say, well, these are non-negotiable? Will there be some points which would not be negotiable in that list? Would Dr. please open the microphone? We started with an approach using like concentric circles. For many of the members of the coalition, we had the idea that it was there were irreconcilable differences. What we have done is getting out of the abstract and started to think about very real things. And when we get to work on actual points, the agreements or achieve something that was very important, in my opinion, to get the union of the center, which is to eliminate mistrust and prejudgments. But the surprise for me was that after so many hours of discussion where we saw that extreme positions, when we went to the really programs, we realized that it was a total agreement. And I want to take my hat off to Dr. Humberto, because when we were talking about how to handle the meeting, it was clear that there were two ways to approach this union. There were different levels of demands. Some wanted a very loose union, another wanted to very much firm or binding. This took us a little bit of work. Humberto also said that we had to start with the issues, programmatic issues, because he felt that it was by looking at those issues that we were able to realize that we was more things that united that kept us apart. The experience showed that Humberto was right, and when we began to work on the topics, there was something extraordinary, which is those who thought that it was in such opposing poles, they discovered that they had some agreements that it really lightened up the environment, and you create a sort of comradeship on the topics, and we had a moment of excitement when everyone is contributing to what everybody else was saying. For example, we're talking about education, so obviously they were easy. Everybody agrees with universal education. Everybody agrees of a higher education, higher quality education. But one says it has to be free. Somebody said. So there was like a jump. And he says, well, what? Free. What we need is to be free universal education. And we realized that that's something that it was a consensus or was hope. We felt that we were part of a family with that. I can give you several examples like that. Environment, for example, Carlos says that we all wanted to have an energy transition, make it quickly, but at the same time, we wanted to do the transition, which was not dogmatic, and that the environmental issues, we could say that they're like two extremes. Those who think that the only way to do that is with zero growth, and others think that it is possible to modulate the approach to the issue of environmental revolution, transformation, by creating some systems that will encourage changes in behavior. And we realize that we all agree there. We are in this at the center. We are people who understand the urgency of facing climate change, and also a vision that is not a punitive vision, rather a generous, happy vision of incentives, and also understanding that for Colombia, climate change is going to be a major opportunity to grow and grow the economy as well. It's a great opportunity for Colombia, and it's not sort of a straitjacket like a punishment, like some political groups are proposing. We have subjects like that, and we realized that the list was much more than a decalogue. It was actually the DNA of this entire group together for a country vision where social issues are extremely important, and will give help Colombians where we have failed them, and we cannot comply. We cannot keep our promises. We have to pay the toll of machinery and corruption. This is what we want to be able to promise, and something that we can, the promises we can fulfill. We want to be effective in what we're proposing. We had to go through a rigid method with what the corruption system in Colombia has been. This was very, very important because we had problems because there were some gray areas in that relationship with traditional politics. And all of a sudden, there was, I also think there was that extraordinary time when we realized that we were willing to not compromise with corruption, with the machinery. And that list is a programmatic, ethical decalogue, but it's also, I think, and I think that Humberto will agree with this, that people who were at that table we're all exceptional individuals, extreme human quality and generous spirits. Humberto and I have been in many meetings that we've had in our life of fights in the statutes and all that, and you see the difference. That is, it was possible. It was there was the feeling that we're in a very fraternal environment. Thank you, Ingrid. I think that a very important topic is going to be the management of the economy. We all agree with that. And talking about this agreement, there's one at least in Corre Robledo, and the others about the free trade agreements, which is a more or less important topic for managing the economy. So we do understand that the winner in this consultation on March 13 is going to be entitled to discuss the way they handle the economy without basis on the agreement on Sunday, or is there some basis that can be used by any winner of the March 13th consultation? Thank you to everyone, for you and Ingrid and Humberto. I want to talk to this from a point of view that I think helps a lot to understand this coalition. This has been a meeting of encounters. All they very well-known people, but they haven't been building things together. We had always been in the public eye from different places with very similar profiles, the educated, democratic, honest people who are thinking about the country, about solving the problems of society, looking for development in the country that is compatible with all this potential that we have. People who are not clientelists, who are not cronyism, who are not corrupted or corruptible, but they haven't built together. We hadn't built together anything. And as Humberto was saying, and this began a couple of years ago, since July 2019, when we got together for the first time, a large part of this group, we started to talk, to get together, knowing how we approach each other's topics, find out their priorities with the, and this is very significant for Colombia in politics, because Colombia had some political parties that appeared a long time ago. There's no programmatic construction, ideological construction. There's no thinking about a country based on conversation with among the civilized people of the same intellectual level and political level. And that's what is taking place here. A team construction, which obviously is being enriched significantly with the arrival of Lillian and Alejandro, who are very well-known people around the country, and especially very widely recognized because of their activities, and very highly admired, because this is a core of people who admire each other. We recognize each other, we appreciate them, we respect each other, and we can talk about the topics and develop topics to merge visions and setting up a country project. This is what happened. Now, as Humberto was saying earlier, And this is a never-ending process. The beauty of this is that we always have a new drive, a new concern, a new point of view, and we adjust social priorities and public priorities along the conversation based on new information. Of course, we're going to have among this team of peers, somebody's going to be leading the presidential process and is going to be responsible for putting on the table what of all these visions and all these priorities of these concepts that we think about from this conversation, they're good to be putting them, from based on the responsibility as a candidate, what will be the order of the factors, but everything will be based on very deep knowledge, and that we are building during this conversation. And for a long time, we've been doing this for a long time. This is in the area of democracy, or know deeply the problems of the country, the research, and some basic principles like we hurt for poverty. We care about the destruction of the country, of the violence. We all had things in common which are extraordinary, fundamental issues to be able to contribute to this experience, enriching this experience, and so that all these visions can create a very important project, country project, and a team of people, of state people, of state leaders who are very high level, who are going to give this country many years of civilized construction, of victories along this road of progress. When you saw the picture in the first questions, and I wanted to talk to you about Dr. Betancourt, why so few women? Because the image was Carolina Soto and yourself, but there were very few women. And there's a video afterwards where you invite Francia Marquez and Margarita Rosa Francisco to be part of this group. Let's talk about how to ensure that visible representation not only of women, but also other minorities, ethnic minorities, for example. How can you guarantee that? I think we all felt that, but there's a space for women that didn't used to exist. This is real. I don't know why this is now, but all the years that I've done politics, I've never seen so much interest for women to participate in policy, and they are given this space, and they are being invited to it. For us at the coalition, there are two areas where we work to. We have a major challenge. All of us here are part of this coalition. We want these lists to be filled with women. I was going to say a different word, but I do think that our objective has to be that in the short term, the Colombian Congress can have a majority of women. That is going to be a generational change, a change of culture, and Colombia can do that, and they can lead that. It would be a new experience, but this is an expectation that we're working on. It means that our list, whether one or two, have a lot of women in them. Many of them are visible in the first leading roles. This doesn't mean that I don't want to answer the question. about women pre-presidential candidates. I think that the coalition has a commitment. We can talk on amongst ourselves. We've discussed this, and we know that this is something on which we have to work. We're inviting women leaders with the qualities that needed to face this type of challenge. This is going to take us a little time, but I'm sure that when the coalition completes the rounds and we have a registration before the electoral council, there will be women's names in the coalition. That's our commitment, and it's something that we want to work on. I think that in addition, we have to work on multicultural issues. When I speak to many women about that, just why you always say that a president and a woman vice president? It's like a cliche, the stereotype of the couple that we reproduce in politics. So that's also has to be changed. There's a number of paradigms that we have to review, but I know that that this is the time when women are gaining their spaces. We've seen extraordinary women in every space in Colombian politics. I'm sure that in these elections we're going to have this phenomena of women in politics. Four years ago, Humberto, you participated. For started a coalition not as ambitious as the Centro Esperanza today. That was a sort of a failure. It didn't achieve that real coalition. So my question is, what are the lessons that you learned to reinforce the center and that you have used in this effort of yours to form the coalition? Have you or have people learned anything from attempts in other countries, for example, Chile? Oh, no, you don't hesitate to call it a failure. I was soundly defeated. I was nobly defeated in the rounds. Several things happened there. Some could be explained, or it might be explained. They're somewhat mysterious, but one of the possible encounter between my candidacy and Sergio Fajardo's, finally we couldn't get it. There wasn't misunderstanding, not with me, but with the structure of the Liberal Party. I was a candidate for the Liberal Party. That is not what's happening today. I think that means a significant change. The lesson is that from the need, as we are doing now, of putting forces together, that although they have phases, they have differences, have found a landing strip, a common landing strip. And going back to one of the previous question, if you allow me, for example, in the area of economics, of the economy, and I want to point out what are the characteristic notes in common amongst us, in spite of the difference. For example, Jorge walks from the left. I come from the liberal. Liberal is very, because in Europe, this is like neoliberal. No, it's defended the state intervention in the past. Even with those differences, we have 4 or 5 key points. We are with free enterprise, respect for private enterprise, the capitalist economy. That's a starting point, and it's common, even vis-a-vis those who are to the left. But when I speak about capitalism, and we also say this, we're talking about conscientious capitalism, because in Colombia, cannot be left to market forces. I think that the pandemic in Colombia, and I think all over the world, has required a greater state presence and intended to close gaps. Colombia is one of the most inequitable um, in the world, country in the world. The tax system before the inequality, before taxes and after taxes is the same. The caste system is not attacking inequality, it is not being demagogical. We've had successes in the fight against poverty, we've advanced in some areas, but the structure of sharing wealth, it's absolutely aberrant. And then there's a second consequence there. We're talking about economic democracy in the Western side. The second is a conscientious capitalism through the state capitalism, a really progressive tax system, which we don't have in Colombia. Part of that is this sort of exemptions and advantages in terms of taxes, which supposedly favor private enterprise, but we have huge advantages, subsidies, which are not acceptable. But the top of the richest pay very little taxes. There's a commitment with the environment, hopefully as fast as we need to have a transition. We're very much involved with that state intervention also in terms of creation of jobs. And on that basis, what we did was to show that a common essential topics, but in the practice we could have differences, but all the candidates have a axis, a pole star, which is shared in terms of the economy. And I wanted to complete the question by saying that is not only agreement in political issues and what Iván said of having a team and what Ingrid said in terms of corruption in Colombia is not a criminal problem. It's just, well, we have to increase the penalties. Let it become an ethical problem. It's a survival problem. It's absolutely affected by the corruption. And that means, as it happened in Venezuela when Hugo Chavez came, is that they say that there's some who want to go to Venezuela. Today's Venezuela is a child of corruption. Mr. Chavez established a totally corrupt system, which was dead, and he just tapped it and destroyed it. I wanted to show what the process has been. And I think that for the foreign audience, it's important because in Colombia, they know about us and what we think about it. But outside the country, we have not so much knowledge about the list or the slates. There's something that Senator Marulanda wrote a letter asking for neoliberalism to set that between Centro Esperanza and have everybody in the same slate, or now we have a new party. We have a new neoliberalism also. Also, that possibility of having a single slate or having several slates. How would you solve that in the next few days? And another important point, not only in the Senate, but also in the House, how Coalition Centro Esperanza is going to get rid of those machineries that are much more invisible, which are the regional machineries, for example. Those who are with us who are not in Colombia, for example, an adhesion by the campaign of Pacto Histórico, somebody knows in Antioquia is the country, but they don't know who belongs to where, because in Antioquia you know who that person is, but elsewhere nobody knows. So how to avoid this type of regional cronyism, or to having a single slate or several slates? We have a question for the three of them. For us, it's something that we're trying to find out with confidence and equanimity, because it's obvious that our ambition has always been to have a single slate, and that many of us agree on that with Iván Marulanda, that would be ideal. Sometimes the ideal is not possible. And if it's not possible, what we do want is to have two slates. They can be two successful slates. We cannot afford to have two lists, one that works and one that doesn't. So this obviously means that for all of us is thinking very deeply that we haven't completed. We're in the middle of the process of reviewing what would be the ideas, the creativity. Either this is going to lead these two slates, or to create some mechanism that we haven't found yet to merge these two approaches for the congressional list or slates in that we've had not an ideological difference, but rather a differential diagnostics of what could happen during the congressional elections. That's a point that is going to be vital in the next few days. I don't know, we're tomorrow, the day after, we're going to be doing this exercise, and we're convinced that we are going to have a group in Congress that will allow us to put an end to what is called the traditional governance, which is the coming president is helped by these traditional persons, like you said, people with which are corrupted in some demands of corruption. This is a business. So the president elected with that support welcomes mortgage. They have a mortgage in the, because the programs they are offering, they cannot be complied with because they have to pay back all these groups that supported them. So I have to break away from this governance scheme so that they don't they are not part in the Congress, but are elected in terms of local support. This is one of the reasons why we want are committed to breaking away from this idea that we can only elect the president with political machinery. After the government of Centro Esperanza is in power, we have to have some discipline benches, and it has to have logic where we can move the sector that is going to be in the Congress using a logic that is not buying and selling political favors. And in that, we need leaders that have the ability to have the authority. That's very important, to have the authority to, like what the Americans do with the whip, which is a political personality that, because of their history and their importance, can influence their colleagues to align them during votes, so to support the government policies for good reasons. So this is also means to schedule a new way, or to program a new way to relate the executive with the Congress. We're talking about, I think this is a revolution, what we are seeing here, a revolution in mentality, a revolution in the way in which the state has operated. This is take back our institutions that have been kidnapped by the corrupt people, and many people going into politics, and they said the only way to be successful is to join those corrupt practices. So for us, it's very important not only to act from the institutional point of view, but also have the means so that we can influence with major debate to be able to break away from those logics that we've had. About that the new liberalism that you wanted to say something about that? Unmute. We've had a lot of solidarity, mutual admiration, and trust. And that has been a huge step forward for this coalition. And I think that that the only road to presidential elections is going to be a very heavily competed, very enriched by all the social commitments and all these things that the state has to solve with the situation of the country, to recover those problems that we've been saying, and to care for those equity for the richness. We have been working on the team on the topic of country, vision country, and on the topic of Congress itself. We're just starting with the first steps. And as you, Ingrid and Humberto said, we have it's just a matter of days. It's a question of days, not even a week. So we're having all these this heat that we're going to have to deal with. There is no success for the coalition if we don't have a bank. If we don't have a bank or a bench, we need a single slate, because the competition in Congress is something else. We're fighting against the political class, which dismounted the Gulf grantees. They had 70 billion pesos to share them all over the country so that the political class can do what they please. That is a very strong competition. For example, the Conservative Bank, none of the candidates from the Conservative Party and if you ask who these people are, it's a matter of buying votes. This is very different from the presidential issue. We don't have, and want to have, and we will not have machinery or private money or public money for our candidacy. We have to do more policy from our politics, from work, from respectability, based on honesty, and but this is going to be there's going to be a clientele, a cronyist votes. In the first round, in the if we're going to have that for the Senate, we're going to have competition from about 1,500 people, at least for 100 seats in the Senate. So we have to see that that is the scenario for the Congress. So it has to be a single list, because if we split up, we become atomized, we run the risk of not having a bench. And if we don't have a bench, we will not have a president. And if we have a president without a bench, we don't have any governance. And that is going to be an unmanageable administration. That's my vision. Thank you, Iván. Since you're the great negotiator, before we continue with Dr. De la Calle, we'll say goodbye to Dr. Ingrid Betancourt, who has to leave. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Ingrid. Since you're the great negotiator, what are they to form that single list for the coalition? One is very practical, and the way Maria Cristina asked me, and the way we're doing it, it just takes us to the everyday. And then we'll go into a more deeper reflection. The idea is, what Iván saying is totally in agreement. I've been discussing with for months, for many months. This necessarily came up when we were creating this coalition. The idea is to have a single slate for the obvious reasons of governance and for what Iván said. Secondly, there's a list that will enable us to balance the existing political capital, the people who have votes with new figures, because if the criterion is only the votes, although there are many great people, sometimes that they don't realize that they have to take the blinds off, and we need new blood. We want the slate that will have a actual effective women's in there, as the electoral capital is mostly in the hands of men. The women are in the slates, but they're not elected because of the system used, which is the preferential votes. But this is my opinion, but it is not everybody's practice. It creates some difficulties. Single slate to balance new in the political power, a political history, political capital, and the guarantee of effective presence of women. This is difficult in practice. This is for obvious reasons. There's a superabundance of quantities in a limited number of seats in Congress. And everybody measures this according to their interests. That this is going on. This is a discussion we've had, and it has existed for having a new list. I don't think this is appropriate. We don't need that, and that will be transmitted to the second vision, to some structural issues, part of which we have discussed. The Colombian system has two problems. The one that I just described about the configuration of the slates, which is to lose for the basis. Iván said that they almost didn't exist. And when they have an arithmetic exercise of how many votes I need to get to Congress, and this eliminates the idea of the bench. The last figure is where the president has a bench that it is consistent with his ideas or her ideas that have, disciplines. They cannot. It's not a dog discipline, but it has to work along a continuous line vis-a-vis the presidential ideals. Here we have lack of configuration of parties, which is what we should be able to correct with these ideas. We should be able to have a bench before the election, because we have the second problem. It sounds like a technical problem. It's the calendar. It is subject to two opposing values. In Colombia in the past, the same day you elected president and the Congress. So the president was a locomotive that provided more governance in 78, and then it became in 91. We decided that we needed something more open, more inclusive, not as rigid or centralistic. So we select the Congress, and then we elect the president. It's been already situated. The president comes into a table that has already been set. They come to a game whose cards have been already dealt, and that's what drives what we call the system of marmalade. Marmalades are all those little aids that the president starts to share with the contracts, bureaucracy, appointments, which is the prize that many congressmen pay for a yay in their elections. That's one of the ways we have to change the calendar. There are some, we have more governance, more openness, more democracy, but that democracy, like it is, it's very obvious. In practice, what we have is huge disorder, which has weakened the institutions for the parties and other institutions as well, because we're going through a bad moment. To summarize, in practice, we have a process for a few days to design the way we're doing it. I believe that the different slates, separate slates, independent slates are an error, and they weaken or harm this political process or project. About the time, this we will only know about this close to the December 16th, when we have to register them. There's something that you are trying to look for, is the center. We're trying to look for the center and everything. So the candidates, the various pre-candidates, the alternatives. I'm from the center, from this. Is there another coalition which called coalition which says we are the center? Another one that is the coalition for experience. Is there a center coalition? And for those who are not with us here, how would you explain to them what the difference is between Coalición de la Esperanza and the Coalition for Coalición de la Experiencia, which are more in Colombia? We know a little bit more about that, but the others, can you explain more? Mr. Marulanda, can you tell us more about that specific? There's some key differences between the Coalición de la Experiencia and Coalición Centro Esperanza. Apparently, they're supposedly democratic, and they're not in ideological streams, although there are key differences. We, the Coalition Centro Esperanza, we embrace the people of the country, the Black in the Pacific, the poor in inner cities, the peasants. We meet on a par with everybody. We know we really live with the people's realities. That group of Coalition of Experience, Coalición de Experiencia, knows about the realities from afar, based on the studies. They are on the International Monetary Fund and academia, and their vision of state is based on books, on theory, and the knowledge of the state based on the offices. They don't go to the peasants or to the indigenous people or to the they send them whatever they send through the intermediaries. They make agreements to calm them down. They don't keep their word. So they don't have a deep commitment to the people. We don't bombard anybody. We don't spray the crops. We don't send. We go to the trenches. We go to the barricades to talk to the people, see what's happening, and we march with them in the street. These others have a significant difference, which is the approach and the type of commitment with society, with the people, and the type of commitment with the state participation. For them, it's more important that the risk rating agencies and the fiscal rules than the pain of the people. For us, it's the other way around. For us, what we care about is violence, the country, the basis of society, the unemployment and of the person without education. That's the real problem of the human beings. For them, that problem is just a rule book that is find it in the statistics in their books. Their commitment is more with monetary orthodoxy, with theory, and with international interlocutors to whom they're always showing a pretty behavior, and they leave the country, the community in poverty. Dr. de la Calle, everybody wants to be center. Who is and who is not center? And that experience of coalition for experience, what is the difference? I think what he says is very true. Surveys show that 70% of the people, of the citizens, say they are centrist, and figures that are close to 70% also add that they are independent. They are not affiliated with any party. So the center is the dark object of desire. Everyone wants to be. This leads to a problem. So that the problem that can be very, very equivocal about the nature of the center. To show you that an organization which is clearly a rightist, authoritarian, is called the Centro Democrático, democratic center. Especially the foreigners will show you how, what the semantic difficulties are. So, leaving that democratic center, which calls itself a center, which is not in the countries, which is Oscar Iván Zuluaga, who also says is centrist and is not a center. His ideas are completely rightist, and that democracy has a break. Not all of models, not everybody. I want to be very careful with what I'm saying. A group of lunatics, extremists, and we have they coexist under that umbrella of democratic center, Centro Democrático. So the difference between us and the coalition de experiencia, as mentioned by Iván, but I wanted to add another one. That coalition of experience, I'm not saying that it is extremist. It's in the center, right center. That's granted, but the inspiration is written not only because of what Iván said, but what they show with their big flag is efficiency. We've been mayors and we've been efficient. And I think that that's a way of looking at the state, which is very different from ours. They've built streets and bridges, and that's true, and I admit that. But that efficiency kills the main problem in Colombia, which is what is the idea of a nation that we have. What is a nation? we cannot do that based on the exclusions, excluded groups nobody thinks of. So it's been successful at coalition in main cities. I don't deny that, but it's very far from the deep Colombia, something that Iván already described, and I'm not going to repeat. Therefore, I think that the best way to rate or to qualify that center is by the results. You shall know them by their fruits. And after the leadership that is under this Centro Esperanza coalition is being characterized by ideas that take into consideration the process of integration and the inequality that we have to defeat. There's something, not to speak too long, which is a differentiation factor with what the Colombia needs is development. Development, public works, is necessary. Without infrastructure, can't develop. But I don't think that is we don't believe that this is what is urgent. We have a human urgency, immediate, a social crisis. We have a social breakage. What happened with the major demonstration in the streets, even before the pandemic, was he says, well, the people with the pandemic went broke, and the first demonstration in the streets were in November 2019. Before the pandemic, there's a substrate of indignation, which is not demagogical, but truly this is the reality. And this is where we have to be careful with the other disguise. Ana Cristina, I also think that the people, the leftists, are falling into the trap of certain of alliances with very non-recommendable people. For example, to give you specifically, Dr. Petro, who has been saying that is the chief of countryside, and lately he's giving room to not only the person I said, but what's happened with the Christian factor, a pastor which is anti-abortion. Anti-marriage, anti-same-sex marriages. And this is a fair trick. No, this is I'm tolerant. Let's not mistake. This is not being tolerant. This is a very deep philosophical problem. But what it is clear is that tolerance has to be learned to defend itself. And I wrote a book. There's a chapter for that. It's something that we've been working on for many years, and we cannot fall for the illusion that, well, since I am tolerant, if we've spoken about the FARC, why can't we talk to others? That is sure, because this is political posture that is based on the freedoms, inclusion, and pluralism. We cannot the next day say that the part of with the demonic agreements that affect the essence of a program that is supposed to be progressive. The last words. What Ana Cristina mentioned, I give you some key points. This reality that I'm saying here, but I want to show you some so that you can build that that dummy there. This alliance, Petro, with that liberal individual that we've mentioned here, that Ana Cristina brought up, has a meeting point, which is called Mayor of Medellin, EPM, which is called new contractors from Ituango. There's major money there that is going to come into politics. And that is based on those characters, and even the director of the Liberal Party, they're all involved there. Petro, the mayor, the and with Tango's new contractors, we're talking about things that are are worth billions of pesos, and those things probably be winding up in politics in a presidential campaign. Now we finished with the pies at the point. It's very deep thanks to Iván, Humberto, and Cristina, everybody who's been with us. It's a long process. We've been at this 11 episodes, and we will continue until the end. I don't know what's going someday. And thank you everybody for being with us. With our webinar is going to be on our webpage, ccacana.com, or this afternoon or tomorrow, the latest. I will close now the session. Thank you, Ana Cristina. Also, I'm sorry for not mentioning you. I should have mentioned you earlier. And always Marta Black, we're our like president, who's head of all the logistics of the organization, engineering, and everything for our seminars. I say goodbye today, and I will see you in our next webinar that we're going to be presenting. Thank you, everybody.